We've recently covered quite a few deities associated with death, and it's extremely interesting to see how different cultures attempt to approach and explain the natural event. In Greek mythology, we see the presence of Thanatos as almost welcomed because he symbolizes the gentle and painless release of death. In Egypt, Anubis is somewhat of an escort, ensuring that the dead pass safely into the afterlife. But in Japan, they have their own twist on death. The Shinigami, meaning gods of death or death spirits. Rather than being directly responsible when someone dies, they almost invite and usher people to their own demise. The term Shinigami isn't one that appears too much in Japanese literature, and it doesn't apply to a specific god or spirit, but rather to a variety of entities that are believed to bring death. Describing their appearance can be rather difficult, as they can take a host of different forms, appearing as a god, spirit, or demon-like figure. In early Japanese literature, the Shinigami were never really described as physical entities. If we look at Ningo Yoyori or Bunraku, the ancient Japanese art of puppet theatre, the works of Chikamatsu Manzaemon commonly tackled the issue of suicide. In a particular story, he describes a man and a woman attempting to commit a double suicide. They described life as being extremely short when being lured by a death god. It's unclear if their actions were driven by the existence of a Shinigami, but in this context the word Shinigami was almost used as an expression to describe how short life can be, especially when we waste time worrying about the inevitable end that awaits us all. In the classical literature of the 18th and 19th century, the depictions of the Shinigami began to change. If we take a look at the Ihon Hyaku Monogatari, often referred to as the picture book of 100 stories, it covers a host of different yokai and supernatural entities. There is a story titled Shinigami, and in this story the Shinigami is described as the spirit of someone who passed, but still harbored bad intent, quite similar to how we would describe a ghost or a poltergeist. The spirit would lead the living along a bad path, and take them to places where previous deaths had occurred. They were known to lead those who were contemplating suicide to places where others had previously hung themselves, in the hope that history would repeat itself. This form of Shinigami was believed to possess people and slowly break their will, causing them to want to die. In later years, it was believed that several things would happen to someone who was possessed by this particular type of spirit. They would either find it extremely difficult to tell the truth when asked questions, or find it almost impossible to speak at all. We can almost assume that these were techniques used by the Shinigami to alienate their hosts from friends and family, making it much harder for them to seek help. It's believed that they could invade a person's thoughts, forcing them to relive every horrible thing they had ever done, until it became so much that death was the only release. The Izanagi and the Izanami are what many consider to be examples of the very first Shinigami. They were the 8 pairs of brother and sister deities that appeared when the earth was created, and they were often associated with both creation and death. The Shinigami are quite similar to the other kami of the Shinto religion, but their history doesn't stretch as far back, because after all they are a relatively recent invention. It wasn't until Japan came into contact with the West, and their ideas of particular gods associated with death, that the idea of the Shinigami really began to grow and develop. Where it was common for Western cultures to have very few gods associated with death, in Japan there were many Shinigami, and they often worked in groups and pairs. There is an interesting tale about a man who is fed up with his life, and so he contemplates suicide, but before he is able to do so, he is visited by a Shinigami, who tells him that his time has not come yet. The spirit explained to the man that each person's life is measured on a candle, and once the flame burns out, that person dies. These depictions differ drastically and contradict the early depictions of the Shinigami, who appeared more as vengeful spirits. It's very clear that in this story they have no control over who lives and who dies. They are essentially told when a person's time has come to an end, or perhaps they are even able to sense when a person's time is near, when their figurative candle is about to burn out. To stop the man ending his life, the Shinigami tells him how he could become very rich. The man would pretend to be a doctor who would claim he could cure any disease. He was given a magical phrase of words that would send any Shinigami back to the underworld and thus lengthen someone's life. The phrase would only work if the Shinigami was sitting at the foot of someone's bed. If they were at the head of the bed, the magical phrase would only cause the sick person to die. With his newfound knowledge, the man indeed grew very rich, and one day when visiting a patient, he saw the Shinigami at the head of the patient's bed. The family begged the man to help, and after declining several offers, the family offered an amount of money so large that the man was consumed by greed. When the Shinigami fell asleep, the patient swapped ends of the bed, and the magical words sent the spirit back to the underworld. When the man arrived home, the same Shinigami was waiting for him, infuriated with what he had just done. The Shinigami told the man that all would be forgotten if they went for a drink to celebrate the man's newly earned fortune. The man of course agreed, not knowing that he had just fallen for a trick. He was taken to a building filled with candles, and he was shown his own candle, which was nearly burnt out because of his actions. The man was told he could extend his life by transferring the wick and the wax of his candle to another. But of course this was another trick. The man failed, dropping his candle and dying. This is a story that I really enjoy, because not only does it show us that the Shinigami are unpredictable, but they seem to have their own distinct personalities. The first Shinigami appeared as quite friendly, explaining to the man how death worked, and even helping him improve his life. The following spirits that the man came across did not seem to be too concerned with the fact that he was sending them back to the underworld, but it was the last Shinigami who was angered by his actions, swearing revenge against the man, and ultimately taking the man's life as a payment for the soul he had stopped him acquiring. Now I know you fans of the Death Note anime and manga have been waiting for this video for a while, and a video discussing the Shinigami wouldn't exactly be complete without taking a look at their recent depictions and transformations. I had previously never read or watched Death Note, but I had heard of the name, and it wasn't until watching the Netflix movie adaptation that I even came across the Shinigami. The Shinigami appear as demon-like gods who write the names of mortals in books known as Death Notes, causing them to die and thus extend their own life. Shinigami are not responsible for every death that occurs, but they can sometimes end a life sooner than intended. The character known as Ryuk is quite a curious Shinigami, who out of boredom drops one of these said death notes into the human world, with instructions on how it can be used. Those who find the book are essentially entered into a bargain or a pact with Ryuk, where he agrees to kill anyone whose name is written in the book in the desired manner. Ryuk appears to feel no apathy for those who find the book, as they are essentially just the means for him to extend his own life. But he does mention several times that he finds humans and their behaviour extremely interesting. The individuals who enter into an agreement with Ryuk are told if they no longer desire to be the keeper of the book, then they can pass it along to someone else, or they can separate themselves from the book for 7 days. Once the 7 days are up, Ryuk would find a new person to assume the role as keeper of the book. Those who find the book are often consumed by the power it comes with, and ultimately the Death Note is responsible for their own death. The Shinigami in Death Note do also vary in appearance. If we take Ryuk as an example, he has long thin appendages and a ghoulish-like appearance. His head and neck appear to be stitched to his body, and he almost reminds me of Jack Skellington from The Nightmare Before Christmas, only much more menacing and deadly. There are quite a few Shinigami that appear in the series, and the one similarity in appearance that they all seem to share is that they all resemble corpses, and I guess when you think about it, that isn't too out of the ordinary for gods of death. If these depictions of the Shinigami are something that interest you, then I suggest you either check out the anime or the manga, or perhaps even the Netflix movie if bad movies are something you enjoy. The deities surrounding death in other cultures are often shown to be selfless individuals who perform a thankless task. I guess one of the main reasons I find the Shinigami so interesting is because they differ drastically, not only because of the sheer amount of them that exist, but they seem to have their own distinct personalities. The role that the Shinigami played drastically changed over the years in Japan. In early Japanese culture, they were used to explain someone dying, particularly the act of suicide, but they soon began to manifest as vengeful spirits who were capable of possessing people and driving them insane until the only release was death. In the most recent depictions, they appear as demon-like gods who strike bargains with mortals as a means of extending their own lives. The Shinigami are most definitely a mixed bag. There are those who choose to help people as they transition into the underworld. There are those who seek revenge and enjoy causing death, and there are those who use the lives of mortals as bargaining tools as a means to extend their own existence. Whether you see the Shinigami as spirits, demons or gods, they're extremely intriguing figures who give us a different outlook on deities surrounding death. Once again, I'd like to thank all the patrons who voted on this week's video and for all the support you've given me. If you guys are interested in becoming a patron and having a choice in one of the videos I make every week, then I'll leave a link in the description as well as an end screen that you guys can click on. But as always, I've been your host, Mythology and Fiction Explained.